in that week. There you go, that's the recording. The lady has started recording, great. Okay, so I mean, I think you probably all met me when I was down a couple of weeks ago, but if you weren't there and you've just come along to listen, I'm Jo Swires and I'm the facilitator for the test and trial for ELM that is looking at commons. The work that we did in the New Forest a couple of weeks ago was part of a broader test and trial, which is looking at commons across England. I'll just introduce you to a couple of other people as well. So we've got Tracy Williams on the call. Hiya, Tracy. So Tracy is working with us on the test and trial, and she's our sort of local facilitator in the New Forest. So she was fantastic a couple of weeks ago, working alongside me and making sure that I knew my way around, and so we worked really well together, didn't we? And that was great. So that's Tracy. Then you've got Susie on the call, who some of you might have contacted or been in touch with to help with various bits of admin and logistics. So that's Susie. We've got Julia, who is the director of the Foundation for Common Land. I don't know if you want to give us a wave, Julia, if you're there. Maybe she's gone for a coffee or sandwich somewhere. And then we've got Lindsay Stride as well, who is also at the Foundation for Common Land, and a lot of you will know Lindsay obviously on the New Forest. So we've got some slides to share. I think we'll just crack on with them. Is there anything else I needed to say? We've put an hour into this. We don't need to take an hour. We'll probably try and finish a bit earlier and let people crack on with the rest of their day. But that's how much we've allowed, but we'll certainly won't take more than an hour. And if you need to leave at any time, that's absolutely fine. One other thing to say, I don't know if you can see at the bottom, there is a little chat function. And if you're feeling like you want to mention something or just make a point about anything, feel free to just type it in there. We might not be able to respond straight away, but if it's something you'd like us to take away that you know, that we want and make a note of, we can do that, and we'll keep that chat for afterwards. Okay, so we'll crack on then. I'll share my screen hopefully, and I'll whiz you through some of these slides that we've just put together. Hang on. Bear with me, I won't be a sec. There we are. Share screen, that's what I need to do first. From the beginning, hopefully. There we are. Can everybody see that? Is that okay? Can you see that, Jim? I can see yours, so I'm looking at you. Yeah. Jim's already won the prize for where it is and who's on the picture. So that was on our first day. I think it's the 18th of October when we were at God's Hill. Okay, so as I said, this is part of the test and trial that we've been working on since July 2020. It's a DEFRA funded test and trial looking at ELM and the future, and specifically our test and trial is looking at commons. So since July 2020, we've been working with a set of different commons, basically with the aim, I'll show you a little bit what we're looking at. The idea being to sort of come up with some kind of a model where ELM could be delivered on commons, and trying to work out what are the things that we need to take into account for ELM to be successful and be attractive for commoners and commons. So the kind of things that we're looking at, sort of two bits to it really. One is how to help commons get ready for ELM and a new agreement. And there's various things we've been developing. So working out who's who and what we need to do and what we already know about the common, getting people engaged. So we've practiced some of our techniques around that on you guys in the New Forest a couple of weeks ago. Done a lot of work on looking at understanding public goods on the common, knowing that ELM is going to be very much about paying for those public goods that are identified in the 25-year environment plan. So we talked about that in our sessions, didn't we? We did quite a lot of work on that. We've been working with people to work out the best way of agreeing and prioritising what to deliver. So we'll talk about that and how that came across in the New Forest. We did some good work on what we'd keep, improve, stop and start, which we got some good discussions going around that. And then this is probably going to be a bit further down the line, but starting to think about who gets paid for what. And also we've been touching on and looking at how important it is to have clear governance and decision making. So they're all the sort of things we've been thinking about and trying to develop different guidance for, really. as we prepare for ELM, and that's the things we've been testing on these different commons. And then we've also been looking at starting to think about what you would need to deliver a new agreement. And we didn't get, because there were so many of us and not that much time when we're on the forest, although we had that week, we maybe touched on a few of these points, but we didn't get into loads of detail. Now then, there we go. Okay, so that's what we've been working on since last July, and we've been doing that in the North York Moors, on Dartmoor and Exmoor, and in Cumbria, and also in the Cotswolds. Okay, I'll keep going. So these little red circles are the things that I think we concentrated on really when we got together a couple of weeks ago. So we were thinking very much about the public goods on the common, and what was great was we were able to get out for 3 of our 4 meetings to actually look at things on the ground and talk about what the public goods look like on the ground. And then we also talked quite a bit about what we would like it to look like in the future. So that was the kind of sort of visioning, if you like. We're imagining, and we didn't get into the detail of this because the New Forest is so big and quite unique, we didn't start to work out exactly what a management plan might look like and what would go into it. But we've been doing that on some of the other smaller commons we've been working with. And then the other thing that we're doing, and a lot of the stuff that we did last with you, will go into this toolkit that we're developing, which is an online resource that people will be able to access and use for their common. Tracy, is there anything you want to say so far in terms of, are we all right? Shall I just keep moving? Anything you'd want to add so far?
No, I think you're doing great, Jo.
All right, keep going. Stop me if there's anything I've missed.
If you miss anything.
Yeah, okay. So what we did in the New Forest, and we've talked quite a bit to the Forest Farming Group that represents a lot of different organisations right back last summer in July and August, to think about when would be a good time to engage with the New Forest. Because when we set up the test and trial, we identified different areas, different locations, and then we're trying to work out the best time to engage with people in those locations. So knowing that the New Forest is so big and complex and has so many different people who hold rights, we decided we'd get going and put some things together and then sort of come and test them a bit on the New Forest, but also recognise that, you know, a lot of the other commons we're working with have got a lot less, a smaller number of stakeholders. We had a lot of discussion about, well, with the limited time that we've got and resource we've got through the test and trial, who would it be? Who should we talk to? Because we can't talk to everybody. I'd have been there for the whole year, wouldn't we? So what we decided to do was extend an invitation out to people through the CDA and the Verderers grazing scheme. So people who hold rights on the common. We wanted to focus in on commoners and talk to them directly. We thought that would be an interesting addition to all the sort of other conversations and discussions that go on regularly on the New Forest. So that's what we decided to do, and we decided we would a good way of going about that would be hold these 4 different workshops in different locations around the forest, and the main way we chose those locations was somewhere that we could step straight out onto the forest and have a walk and look at things on the ground, so that there's no point in coming. Well, for me, I didn't want to come all the way from Yorkshire and then sit in a village hall for the week, to be honest. But that worked quite well. And also I really wanted to hear what people thought things looked like on the ground, and Tracy, obviously because Tracy's more local than me, we were able to do that quite successfully. So what we did then, we looked at, if you remember, we had that checklist, and we spent quite a bit of time thinking about the public goods on the common and what was important. Then we used that checklist is one of the tools we've been developing through the test and trial, and then we also spent some time discussing the future. Okay, so that's what we did. Next couple of slides are about what we learned, I think. So I'll keep going. So there's some very enthusiastic participants in the bottom corner there. You might recognise yourself. So what we learned for the test and trial, well, obviously that public goods checklist, we've used that a lot and we've been tweaking it as we've gone along. That seems to be quite a useful way of getting people engaged and thinking about public goods and what they are and what they might mean on your common. We've been doing quite a bit of work on mapping on our other in our other areas. I don't think for the New Forest we brought some maps of the local area, didn't we? But I don't know what you think, Tracy. That we didn't use them that much, really.
No, we thought we would prepare some maps, and especially when we were out trying to identify, the 6 public goods and looking at what those things were and then trying to map them out. We initially thought that's what we would do, but I think eventually really just being out there and everyone being able to wander around and discuss and talk about the public goods was actually better than kind of doing stuff on bits of paper. So we didn't really get to do the mapping, and also because it is, as you said, such a huge area, such a vast area, and we were just concentrating on the little bit around that we could walk around for a couple of hours. Yes, didn't really do the mapping.
No, and actually the mapping work we've done in other areas tends to be maybe when you sort of, like you said, there's a smaller area and you can all sit around one big map and look at it together. So that didn't work quite so well for us on the New Forest. So in terms of how we sort of trying to manage the engagement, we were really, and this is never perfect, is it? Because there's never a perfect time or location for everybody to be able to come along to something. But we sort of really try and take that on board and think about how we vary that a bit. So obviously the timing, it was during the day, which might not suit everybody. Evening meetings could work, I think, when people are working, but obviously because we wanted to get out on the common and it was dark in the evening, we stuck to the daytime. We tried to reach as many people as we could through the contact lists that we had. Whether we did manage to reach everybody, I think hopefully we did, but that's always a challenge, isn't it, to make sure you get to the right people and people hear about things, but hopefully we did. And obviously, like we said, those locations, we tried to get a good mix from around the forest. And so then the format of the workshop, I was really sort of pleased with that, and I would definitely, I think, use that again. The fact that we met somewhere, but then we spent quite a lot of time out on the common. And I think we were all a bit, I certainly got that feeling, we were all just so pleased to see each other and spend a bit of time discussing some of these issues when we've all been stuck at home for such a long time and not been able to engage so much. And I think we sort of, the point came across that this isn't something that you do that often as commoners, in terms of just getting together in these smaller groups to discuss the issues. So I think that worked quite well. I think half a day was plenty. And we wouldn't have wanted to extend it any longer, and just having that little sort of, having lunch together and a bit of time to chat as well seemed to work really well for us. And then that last bit that we did, that keep, improve, stop, start, I think we definitely would use that again from the test and trials point of view. It's a really good way into thinking about what the future issues are that are really important for the common, and starting to think about a management plan for the common. So I was certainly pleased with how that went. So from my point of view and from the test and trials point of view, thank you so much to all of you for engaging so much in it, because it meant that we could learn a lot from how we're developing the different tools for the test and trial. So thanks for that. There was some good learning there. And then obviously we learned all sorts of stuff about the New Forest. And I've just put down the 6 headings here of the 6 different public goods, and the ones that I've highlighted and made bigger and in purple were the ones that we talked most about, I thought, and we raised most issues about. I don't know if you want to mention anything on there, Tracy.
Yes, I think it's interesting because when you read the DEFRA list of things, the first one you've got there, beauty, heritage and engagement with the environment, is kind of at the bottom of the list. And whether they mean, it probably doesn't matter to DEFRA that it's, it's just happened to be at the bottom of the list, but it almost feels like it's everything that doesn't fit into the other 5. But actually, when we talked about that one in the forest, beauty, heritage and engagement came out as the top thing, really encompassing everybody who is commoning and all of the things that commoning is doing and creating in the forest. So everything seemed to then fall out from that, all of the other things on the list, didn't it? It was really
I think so, yeah. And that sort of tradition and system of commoning on the New Forest underpins everything that goes on, doesn't it? And we talked quite a lot about that, so that really came out high for us. And I think we also, when we certainly, and it was good, one of the really good reasons why you were there, Tracy, sort of pointing out some of the habitats and having some good discussions about the wildlife and obviously about the grazing and how important that is for looking after that landscape. That came through a lot to me. And we also seemed to talk quite a bit, not quite as much as the other 2 maybe, but we were starting those discussions around carbon sequestration and climate change and all the rest of it. That came through quite strongly for me. Yeah, and
I was really pleased with how everybody really engaged with these events and out on the walks. So many people were really talking about what they were seeing and how that fitted into the public goods. And there was such a lot of good discussion. You know, I was really pleased with how the events went, and thank you to everybody who really participated. You know, it was really great.
What I'm just going to do now is, and just to say, these notes that I've made, if anybody wants to see them, there's nobody sort of names attached to any of it. They're just very general. You know, we can share those with you if you'd like to look at them, or they're useful to any of the different organisations in the future. So, oh, come on, things frozen now. There we are. I must not have been banging it hard enough. So the next 4 slides with that sort of keep, improve, stop, start stuff that we talked about. And we were sort of thinking about, I think the question was, what would we like the common to be like in 10 years' time? It was just sort of an opening gambit, but it seemed to generate a lot of good discussion. So in the background there's a whole, is my list, or your list, because this is taken literally straight from those flip charts that you all filled in. And this is the stuff that I can share with you if you're interested. But I sort of scanned through them, and you know, when you read something fairly quickly, you get an impression of what seemed to be the big issues that were coming through. So the brown boxes that I'll put at the front that sort of overlay that longer list are the things that really stood out for me in terms of what people really highlighted, or that a lot of people talked about. So on the keep list, things that are really important to keep for the future, I'm not going to read it out to you. Those were the things in that brown box that were really important, and that I felt like were sort of emphasised across all the groups that we worked with. So that, is there anything else that you'd sort of say around that one that stood out for you, Tracy?
Yeah, I think the awareness of how important commoning is in creating and maintaining all of the rich diversity of habitats and species that we see. That really came through from everybody, that, you know, that was one big thing, that keeping that, you know, the fact that the commoning is actually maintaining it. So keeping that tradition going was the key thing that came through from everybody.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because one of the things we did talk about quite a bit, and I've not highlighted it in these slides that much, is we talked about the fact that there is already some amazing stuff on the forest,
Yeah.
you know, the maintenance of the forest and the way it is at the moment is to be celebrated. You know, it's not like we're looking to change everything. There's so much out there that is looking good and is in really good condition. So yeah, thanks.
Yes, and we did say that it was really important. Sorry, I keep stopping. I'm letting people into the thing. We did say it was really important that, you know, in the past, with a lot of different schemes and grants that have been around, you know, you're often paid for doing new things and not paid for things that you're doing already. And we were saying how important it is within ELM to obviously recognise everything that people are doing already. So the maintenance is really big thing, and, you know, hopefully the payments for that will be recognised. That was one big thing that came through in a big discussion that we had.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one was around, it's doing that thing again where it doesn't want me to move forward. I wonder why it does that. There we are. So this was the improve list. I think this was maybe the longest list. And the things that came through for me, I mean, there's a whole ream of stuff on there, but it was definitely, and I don't know if I think it's partly a little bit due to the fact that the last 18 months have been such a weird 18 months, and so many more people have been visiting places like the New Forest and engaging with those areas that they've never done before. But I think it's always an issue, and this came through strongly, I think, in every group. So I've just highlighted this. And it was around education and information. So a lot of this around sort of visitor pressure, but not just visitors, local people too, about communication and about helping people to understand what the forest is and what's so important and special about it and how they should engage with it. So that was, that's just me generalising a lot of points in there. I don't know if there's anything else you'd want to add to that, Tracy.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think the increase of there was lots of things that people wanted to improve. Obviously, then there is a big list, and it is available for everyone to have a look at. I think the key things that I've pulled out of this were, as you said, communication. So there was communication from and between, not only from to the public, but also communication from and between the organisations and commoners that are out there at the moment. So that was one thing that came out. And also the public understanding of why things, you know, are asked to either not to be done or to be done. And those things, sort of the communication could be improved. And there was also something around, there's quite a lot of discussion about the increase availability of commoners housing and support to young commoners, looking at how, you know, housing and land and that kind of thing. So there was a big discussion about how those things could be improved. And as you said, a lot of it was sort of pointing to recreational use, and obviously because of what we've seen over the last year or year and a half or whatever of people staying at home and coming to the forest, you know, and there was a lot of sort of improvement ideas came out from that, weren't there?
Which are probably things that have rumbled on for a long time, but have been really sort of highlighted and exacerbated, I guess, over the last 18 months or so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the next one was the start list.
Yes.
There was quite a mix of stuff here, so I'm not sure that I can summarise it that well. But
I think this one was really interesting,
yeah.
wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was.
We had yeah, I mean, there was a lot of support for the idea of reinstating local groups in areas. So that a lot of people mentioned that some time ago there used to be groups of commoners in different parts of the forest, almost like sort of taking ownership of an area and feeding into management of those areas. And there was quite a lot of discussion about that. And when you've got such a big area as the forest, that was quite an interesting thing that was talked about. And there was an idea about so starting up. So the thing about the public face of commoning. So there was a lot of discussion through all of the groups actually, but especially from the young commoners, about the public face of commoning and about increasing engagement and communication, and this idea of maybe having more kind of, I think somebody called it forest guardians, a kind of a role for young commoners, and sort of face-to-face engagement and education with the public. So there was a lot of really interesting things that came through from the start discussions. Things like, you know, park and ride for visitors and down to, yeah, the new incentives to help young commoners with housing and land. So there was a lot of stuff came through, and a lot of things that would be good to continue talking about, I think.
But the other thing for me was, you know, people have felt under a lot of pressure, so bombarded in these last 18 months by, you know, so many more visitors and so many people on the common who don't understand it that well. And that came across, you know, I think people are tired, aren't they, of that, and you know, and have felt under pressure from that. So that obviously came through quite a bit as well. But yeah, there was some good discussions there, and I think that was I'm really glad that we had that. We had a meeting on the Tuesday night with the young commoners, and that was a good way of them sort of raising their issues as well, and brought another perspective. So that was useful. Okay, so the next there we go. Was the stop one. Do you want to say anything about this one, Tracy? Well, to be honest, that to me, that quote that I've put in there, which says, oh, sorry, activities that damage the forest and interfere with or prohibit commoning, that kind of summed it all up, really. I was going to say that,
I was going to say that really did sum it up. You know, most of the things that were under the stop, to be honest, you could have put under sort of recreational activities, if you like. And like you say, the sort of damage that causes, not only to kind of threats to habitats and species, but also to commoning, you know, depending on what types of recreational activity it is. And also there was sort of something about attitudes of entitlement amongst kind of, you know, the people coming to the forest, and what is kind of perceived that can be done, or, you know. So there was a lot about stopping a lot of the things fell under the heading of recreation, I think. One thing that was mentioned, which was quite an interesting, I thought was quite an interesting thing, was the fact that the national park is called a park.
Yeah.
And, it was brought up that the perception of that
Yeah.
could be very different than, for instance, if it was called a nature reserve, that actually people coming into the forest would maybe have a different perception of what is allowed. So that was a very interesting concept, and lots of discussion went on about that. So
I think that was mentioned in every meeting, to be honest. Yeah, so that was an interesting one, definitely.
It was an interesting
and I guess, you know, because we can still, but unlike the other designate, you know, other national parks where I've been working for the test and trial, you know, the New Forest is a very new designation as a national park, isn't it? So people can remember, you know, before it was. So that, yeah, that's definitely still sort of a hot topic for people, isn't it? And we got quite a bit of feedback on that. Okay, so the next, I think that was it from those four, those kind of four headings that you all helped us to fill in and chip in your ideas on. I can't remember what the next slide is now. I'll have to have a look. Oh, here we go. So this was the best day. This was the sunniest day, by the way, when we went to East Boulder. It must have been, wasn't it? A couple of weeks that was on the Thursday. So yeah. So in terms of what happens next with the test and trial, we're going to be wrapping up this one. We're going to have another sort of webinar, a broader webinar about the whole test and trial, and you'll hear a bit about how the New Forest stuff has fed into that in December. So look out for that date, and we'll let you know when that is if you're interested. And then between sort of January and March, we'll be submitting a final report to DEFRA. And just to say that the way that we've engaged with you, I think we talked to over 50 people in that week. And what was great was it wasn't just, I felt like we had some really good conversations. It wasn't just a kind of me and Tracy, like we are doing now, just doing a presentation and people listening. You know, I felt like we probably talked one-to-one to a lot of people, and certainly in small groups, didn't we, over that week. So even though it was a bit intense, I'm you know, really thank you for chipping in so much. I was really pleased that you know, I thought that was a good number. Obviously it's not fully representative, it was just a snapshot in that week of who could come along and chip in, but we certainly managed to generate a lot of different feedback and ideas, so thanks. So in between January and March then we'll be giving our sort of final presentation to DEFRA and a final report, and we've got a couple of workshops planned, which I think might I'm not quite sure where they're going to be yet or the detail of them, but there'll probably be a couple more opportunities to get online and see what our sort of final thoughts are on this test and trial. And then at the moment we're just putting together, or well, I'm not involved so much in this, but another test and trial which will look more closely at the lowlands and areas like the New Forest, and that's kind of in development at the moment. So I am going to just stop sharing this and just pass to you, Lindsay, if that's okay. And maybe you, and I think Julie is on the call as well, if you would maybe just chip in and tell us a little bit more. I think people might be a little bit interested to know what hopefully that's going to involve.
Absolutely. So over the past or the period of this current test and trial, it's really become apparent that we need to focus more on lowland commons, and particularly the larger and more complex lowland commons. So we are currently writing a proposal for DEFRA for a lowland commons test and trial, and we'll be focusing on the New Forest and on the Malverns. Two areas of lowland common which are similar in many ways, interestingly. They have a similar set of complex legal sort of provisions. So where we have the verderers, they have the Malvern Hills Trust, and their Acts of Parliament were also brought in the late 1800s, so similar to the New Forest. The test and trial will not be looking at practical things on the ground. DEFRA didn't want to know about those elements because they've tested them extensively in other test and trials. What they're interested in, and particularly this is a landscape recovery test and trial, so for the element of the ELM scheme that looks at the landscape, DEFRA wanted us to answer some questions which were focusing on governance. So the test and trial will be broken down into 3 phases. The first phase will be looking at how to incentivise participation from all stakeholders, so commoners, landowners, land managers, and other interested groups which have an influence on decision making in the New Forest and in the Malverns. And we can extrapolate that out to the wider areas of Lowland Common. The second phase will look at how to construct an agreement which incorporates perhaps several other areas which have been under agri-environment. So in the New Forest, we have several different HLS agreements. Some have rolled over, some have expired. So going forward, how could you include all of those agreements into one, which had a much more landscape scale approach? And then the third phase of the test and trial will look at how to make those agreements much longer term. So DEFRA are looking at 30+ years for these agreements, which enable a much deeper level of planning and provision for the future. But obviously all of those things have legal implications, have implications for how people sign up and what they will do over that period of time. So we've written the proposal so that we can be very responsive to the discussions on the ground. And we hope to engage with as many stakeholders as possible in each landscape, but particularly commoners and commoners associations, so that everyone feels engaged. And I think one of the real benefits of this current test and trial is that perhaps for some of you, this has been the first time that you've been really actively engaged in discussions about the management and the future of commoning in the forest. So we hope as FCL to really strongly continue to engage with New Forest commoners and New Forest stakeholders. Yeah, Julia, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you very much, Lindsay, and I apologise for the background noise. I'm in a bit of a public place here. Just to say that we're firstly wanted to thank Joe for, and all of you who participated over the last while, and it's been, and particularly in the week that Joe was down working with Tracy, but it's actually your views that matter. So, and thank you for taking the time to come today. With regards to the next phase, I think what's really clear is that the New Forest both needs and deserves a bespoke arrangement, and we want to make sure we have something that works for you and for everybody who benefits from the forest. That's what we'll be very much looking at looking at this longer time frame, and which will have a degree of flexibility. I should just add that this is just a test and trial. This is not entering into an agreement, so you will still be part of your current HLS agreement. This is exploring the opportunities and to feed into DEFRA for the planning, but there's no intention at the moment to move across to a landscape recovery scheme. And there may be other options that will be appropriate for you. So nobody's committing anything by participating. It's simply, let's try and plan the future. It's all about taking the future into our hands rather than being done to. And it's making sure that we're all collectively working. The commoners are working collectively and collaboratively with the verderers, with the Forestry England and with the National Park Authority, and that you are and being able to feed in. And of course, we're liaising very closely with DEFRA, and we're really pleased that Henry Ashcroft, who's leading on Commons Policy in DEFRA, is here today and listening. So just want to say thank you. And we will be employing somebody to work 3 days a week in the New Forest is the intention. So there will be a lot more time, 3 days a week for about 15 months. So there should be lots of opportunity there. So I think that's all from me, but we're happy to take questions if anyone's got any questions.
Great, thanks Julia, thanks Lindsay. If there's any, I mean, we haven't got time to start a big discussion, but if there's anybody who's got any sort of burning question up that they want to just ask, feel free then before we wrap up. Or maybe that's just stuff you want to digest and look out for future updates. Has anybody got anything they want to ask? You put it in the chat or put your hand up if you like. We've stunned you all into silence.
I thought the representation that you gave was great.
Thanks.
So I liked all the points, so that was good.
Well, that's good to know that it's hard to summarise so much good discussion, isn't it? But anyway, we can send things around and people can read them after, but hopefully we've sort of highlighted the main points. And for me personally, just to be able to we always hoped that this test and trial would run much more like this and we'd be able to get out and about and see people in these groups. And obviously because of COVID, we weren't able to for a long time. So it's just really nice to be able to test out what we'd hoped we'd be able to do and see so many of you in person. So that was great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just really think that everybody who came, I think at the end of the day went away hopefully knowing a little bit more about what this term 6 public goods means, and actually that it's not as confusing as it at first it seems, and that actually everybody was really proud and pleased that you know, everything they're doing as commoners is underpinning all of the important habitats and species that we know we've got. So and it was really great to have so much participation and so many good ideas and discussions as we walked around. So thank you to everybody who came. It was really good. And as Joe said, this isn't going to end up just being a sort of a list of ideas and things and thoughts on some paper on a shelf. You know, that, as Joe said, that there will be a report done back to DEFRA, and also all of the information that we gathered from everyone anonymously, obviously through the week, is there for that will be fed back to everybody who should have an interest. Obviously, you know, groups like the Forest Farming Group will have this information. Everybody who's kind of has a stake in thinking how a new elm scheme for the forest will develop. So this will be fed back. So it's not just going to go on the shelf.
Thanks, everybody. I don't think there's anything else to add. I think we could just go and, I don't know what it's like. I'm in Helmsley in North Yorkshire and the sun is shining. So if it's great. So I won't take up any more of your afternoon then. It's really great to see you all. Thanks so much for coming. That's great. There's more than 30 of us today, and it's nice to see you all again. Look out for the notes and, you know, the updates. And if you're not on our FCL's mailing list for these update webinars that we're doing around test and trials, if you drop an email to Susie to make sure you're on the list, and then if you're interested in sort of keeping up to date with some of the work that we're doing, you'd be welcome to join us anytime, and we'll keep you up to date through those webinars. I think that's it. Thanks, everybody. It's great to see you all. And take care and enjoy bonfire night. Oh gosh, all those animals. Yeah. Hope you have a peaceful bonfire night.
Yeah.
Thanks,
right.
Thanks then. Bye. See you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Someone's got their hand up. Alison has got her hand up.
Alison. Alison, you're on. Hang on, ask to unmute. You're on mute. I can't hear you. Ah. Are you there, Alison? No.
Maybe she pressed something by mistake.
Just while you're waiting for Alison, Joe, it's Sue Bennison. Don't know if you remember me, I came along on the Wednesday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love you to send the charts through. Would it be possible for you to remove the bit in the middle so you could read all the words behind?
Yeah, I've got it in a document, so I'll just send the document. Yeah, that's fine. It's just in a Word document.
And yeah, please keep me up to date as things go along. I'm very interested.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Well done, Joe.
Okay, it's fine. It's good. Yeah.
Apologies for the background noise.
All right, it's fine.